I'll get to it eventually. All right. Hello, everybody. Back on it. All right, so I brought some things with me to help you all think conceptually about the law and to think about the fence law and that kind of stuff in particular. So usually how I start these out is I ask, has anybody in here never played this game? Like they're looking at this and they're thinking, I have no idea what you're talking about. I actually had somebody that never played Monopoly. It's absolutely amazing. So in your all's house, when you all played Monopoly, how did it end? Bloodshed, if it was our house or somebody flips the board over or something like that. When you're all playing, what goes in the middle? Get out of jail free, money. Does everybody agree? Any of y'all ever read the rules of Monopoly? It specifically says do not play with money in the middle of the board. And just about nothing else is more conducive to explaining agriculture law in Kentucky than that. So you all learned the rules of this game from somebody who what? Also didn't read the rules of the game. And in ag, we're guilty of that a lot. The place that I eat lunch most days is primarily a seller of gasoline, but there they have a couple tables, and they sell lunches and breakfast and things like that, and they have knowledge tables. And at these knowledge tables, you can go in one day, your transmission's slipping, the guy will say, I know exactly how to fix that. And he might be right? The next day, while you were fixing the transmission, you slipped and torqued your back a little bit. Same guy is also a part-time, not only a part-time mechanic, he's a chiropractor too, can tell you the exact same thing. So beware of some of these knowledge trees, because oftentimes that knowledge might not be correct. So you have the internet, you have the extension offices, you have things like that. The thing about knowledge, or legal knowledge, is analogous in my mind to a plunger. When do you need a plunger? Do what? Oh, if you've ever needed a plunger, it's probably an emergency. Yeah, it's oh God, maybe the house will burn down and cover what I've just done, that kind of thing. But that's probably incorrect. I'm going to say you don't need the plunger during an emergency. When do you need the plunger? Before you have an emergency. Have you ever found yourself in an emergency needing a plunger and not having one present? That's a much different type of an emergency. So legal knowledge is the exact same way. You've got to know the law before the law affects you. You need to seek out legal knowledge before you engage in the activity that you're going to be engaging in. Farming and animal agriculture is one of them. Lack of the law, generally speaking, is not an excuse in Kentucky. So if you're going to engage in the activity, it is your duty to go read all about it and make sure you understand the rules prior to having the emergency. So lucky here, everyone has one of these books, and you all have the fence law in the back of it, or in the front of it. Fence law, it's the last tab in your all's book. So let's all flip to it, and we'll go through the fence law together. And then we're going to talk about how a lawsuit works, in case you don't want to pay attention to this. Now, my copy in here, Jeremy, I'm going to pop it out of this book real quick. Is your all's bound together? This thing in the top, when you're sitting at your office and you put one of those things in, do you grab your stapler? Jeremy, it is a staple. A steeple is the thing on the top of a church. Well, it's part of the plunger situation. Now you know. All right, so we're going to skip the first page of 042. That's where the real meat and potatoes is, but we're going to skip ahead to the definitions. So when I talk about legal knowledge in Kentucky, the very first thing I'm going to say is let's forget these definitions. Look at the definition of a legal fence in Kentucky. It is a fence 4 feet tall, sufficient enough that cattle cannot creep through the fence. Have you all ever had cattle creep through a fence? You have? Oh, I thought you had your head nodding over here. I've never seen it. I've seen them violently escape from a fence. I've seen some just casually nonchalant find the hole, look at me to make sure that I know that it's watching, and then step through some fence and on its merry way. If you're a judge in Kentucky and you have 1,000 different cases on your docket and you're trying to get through them as quickly as possible, usually I ask the kid in the room, if somebody brought a child with them, what they think a good fence is. If you're the judge, what's a good fence? You all reckon? Because you're not going to drive out there with your tape measure and measure 4 feet and cattle creeping. What would you all judge a good fence to be? What keeps the animals in? And a bad fence, by that same logic, is what? Didn't keep them in. How many people drove here today, passed some fence, and thought the only reason the cattle are in that paddock is because they want to be? Yeah? Some people are laughing. The ones that aren't laughing, they're laughing at your all's fence, right? So it's a Monday morning quarterback thing. It's what you should have done. And a lot of things in the law are like that. You should have had fence sufficient enough that the cattle can't escape, and that's one of them. So by default, it's called judge-made law or common law. In Kentucky, the definition of a good fence is one that keeps the cattle in. So if you ever have cattle get out, once even, that is demonstrable evidence that perhaps your fence is not a lawful fence. And if your fence is not a lawful fence, let's skip forward to the next page. In 030, it starts to talk about if the cattle escape your fence and it's not a lawful fence, the consequences of it. So here in 030, it talks about you and your neighbor have an obligation to maintain and build and construct fence, and if one of you fails between 030 and the one after 020, you can be hit for up to triple the damages if it's your third offense or second offense and thereafter. So imagine cattle getting out the first time, causing damage, and then you haven't fixed the fence long enough that the law penalizes you at 3 times or double damages, depending on what it is, for the damages that you cause. Let's talk about cattle getting out. A couple years ago, I started running cattle again after coming to these schools. I would always talk about the reason I didn't have cattle and went to row crop farming because nobody ever called me at 3 in the morning saying, hey, Clint, your corn's out in the middle of the road, go get it. But that does happen with cattle. I started running feeder cattle with my best friend from growing up. I had custom ear tags printed, and I thought it would be absolutely hilarious to put his phone number on the tag, not mine. This was even funnier when the former owner of this tag did get out, went on a walkabout down the road, and played tag with a vehicle that was passing, and they recovered this tag and knew exactly who to call. So we had an insurance claim filed for vehicular damage. It wasn't that bad, but imagine somebody, a mom in a minivan carting a van full of kids, cows in the middle of the road, and what could be a violent impact turns much worse when you go to swerve and the thing can tumble, hit a bridge embankment, roll down into a ditch if there's no guardrail. The damages that you can cause by cattle are just the same as the damage you could do by hitting somebody with your vehicle. It's the exact same thing. It's an extension of you, and when your cattle are out, you're starting to talk about major damages, and most of the time you don't get to pick who your cattle are going to harm. So you have the burden or obligation to maintain your half of the fence. And that's it. That's Kentucky fence law. Or if it was, no, I'm just kidding. There's a lot more to it. If it was that easy and everybody maintained their fence, there wouldn't be the need for everything else. So let's back up to 042. That was on the front of the pages that you have. And to find the actual obligation, it's in a weird spot. And I get called anywhere from a couple to a couple dozen times a week with somebody saying, what fence is mine to fix and maintain, and what is my neighbor's? And it is found in 042. Go down to sub 6. It's near the bottom of the page. So this thing says, let's imagine we're all neighbors, and just for easy math, we have 1,000 feet of common boundary fence between us. That's linear feet. It could be a perfectly straight line that's 1,000 feet long. It could be a dog leg or have crooks and angles in it, but whatever math it takes, whether it's a zigzag or a straight line that you pull the zigzag out, whatever the 1,000 feet is, if we both met in the middle and we're looking at each other, Jacob, we are both responsible for the fence to our right. That is Kentucky's fence law, and that's, more importantly, where it's found. So you can talk to somebody if you need a little help convincing them that that is what it is. Yes, sir.
What if your farm joined up and there's a subdivision over there? You got a whole bunch of people over there that don't have no livestock, no nothing, just dogs and cats.
How wide is each lot? Because one place I was going to run cattle, I used to crop the other side of that place. They put a subdivision in, and I have 367 neighbors because I counted them because I have good auto steer and probably lack of groundhog holes that day while I was doing it. So you have 300 individual people. Absolutely. In here, in Kentucky's law, look up here at the top. So C sub 2, this is who it applies to. The owner of real estate used for agriculture purposes, so that's you, can force your neighbor, and it doesn't talk about what they're doing. As long as you are the one engaged in animal agriculture, you can force your neighbor to engage in the fence law. It doesn't matter if that neighbor is a school system, a municipal water treatment plant, I dealt with that last week, the state or highway road departments, another neighbor that is a row crop farmer, a subdivision, or the sweet little old lady or a church. It does not. As long as I'm standing on my property and you're standing on yours, it's both to our right. So but that'd be my left would be your right. This is a classic peanut butter sandwich situation. You ever been making a peanut butter sandwich and it fall off? Which side's it always land on? Peanut butter down, right? Every single time. So I guarantee when we're looking at each other, your half is going to be perfectly flat, tabletop, 6 foot deep soil. You can drive all those wooden posts that Jeremy is talking about. Your half, you'll have to use a rock drill on them or a boring machine or something like that. You have lakes, rivers, and mountains to cross on your side. So it's not 50% of the cost, it's 50% of the linear value, right? Regardless of terrain and cost to build. Now, if you force somebody to go to the mat in the court system, we're going to talk about how a judge can apportion those costs in a minute. But does everybody seem to understand where the division of duties lies, right? 50%. Before we go on, I'm going to say there's going to be an asterisk next to this. Just in case, flip over, well, it's a couple pages, to 020. These things can and do exist, and this is a prior agreement that you and neighbor or your predecessors in title have signed where they said, okay, we realize there's the Kentucky fence law, but we're going to modify it and do something else. You can come up with an agreement for your neighbor for whatever you want that overrides the law, so long as both parties have signed at some point. So that means you can actively go to your neighbor, you and I can, and we can just say, let's switch sides. Maybe that makes more sense, or whatever else it could be. You and I could do that. Or maybe you all have inherited or bought a farm, or somewhere back in your title, somebody else did this with their neighbor, and that is, you are bound to it the same as you would be an easement, so long as that thing was properly recorded. So just be aware, read your deed, or if you're counting as a Les Pettis book or something like that where weird things are filed, just make sure that when you do that, just check your name, make sure that that farm isn't subject to one of those agreements. They are very, very popular, and if you ever ask me to subdivide a few 5-acre lots off of your property to sell to make some money or to give away to a kid or something like that, I'm going to put it in the deed that, hey, you neighbor that's not involved in ag are 100% responsible for the fence. Just because I'm sneaky. And they're going to buy it anyway, so it doesn't. Don't worry about that. Yes. Yep, you're still bound to it because you took the property as it was presented to you, and that was huh? It's got to be recorded. It had to have been discoverable when you got the thing.
New parties, how would you break it?
By a new agreement, if you wanted to, because the two parties can agree to whatever they want, or they can agree that neither one of them like the old agreement. Let's just let Kentucky fence law as it stands happen. Does everybody understand that? Yes, Chris.
When you have a lot of neighbors, like a subdivision, like you gave the example of, when does it become impractical to impose the fence law on 300
All the time, nearly every time. My favorite is when they dump all their yard clippings and grass over on my side. I mean, at one point you're thinking, free forage for the cattle. They will also dump over their cherry tree trimmings, things out of the garden, things like that. If you have really good ones in a subdivision, they'll ride their four-wheelers out there because nobody told them they couldn't, right? Or you've just not caught them yet. Y'all don't have neighbors like that? Cut their fence so they can get their four-wheeler through. Yeah. Yeah, or you have the occasional raccoon hunter that will also cut your fence at night to make going and retrieving a raccoon easier. Yes, I've had all of the above on that. And so you've just got to educate them about the fence law if you can find them. And it's very rarely that neighbor. It's some other kid in the subdivision that rode the four-wheeler to that spot that went through to come get to you. The practical part of that, Chris, is the rest of this section is what to do when your neighbor doesn't comply. And there are steps you can do, and that's a lawsuit if they don't. Sometimes it's easier just to plow around the stump. If you want cattle there, go on and fix the fence. And we're going to talk at the very end about, I know what the law says, but if you make a decision to put cattle out there in a pasture or paddock that is subject to them getting out, I understand your neighbors might be responsible for part of the damages according to the fence law, but I guarantee you're going to get sued because they're going to be your cattle that got out. Yes, sir?
What happens if your fence gets cut? You have no idea who cut your fence, but all of a sudden one night it got cut, your cattle got out, and caused a bunch of damage to somebody's car.
Now, as the sneaky lawyer that I am that runs cattle, what do you think my protocol is every single day feeding the cattle? Check the fence, ride the fence. So if it happens during the middle of the night, you might be able to claim that it was a lawful fence, but it was not an act of God, that it was an intentional act by somebody else. You could argue on that point, I think. Where my parents live now, they live on a pretty busy main road, and they have a road that tees off of it, and not only does it tee, but it kind of goes uphill a little bit. So when somebody's coming down the T road, they have to stop before they turn either left or right. What's fun is after it's been dry like this and it rains once, or literally when it snows, ices, or anything, a lot of people don't like to stop at that intersection. They sail right on through into my parents' fence across from it. And my parents do have nice plank fence, except all the way down to across from that road where they just don't even bother putting it up anymore. We quit running cattle there, and now they get to run into an alfalfa field. If you have a spot like that on your farm that you know is a bad curve, it is somewhere where vehicles like to exit the road involuntarily, be highly cautious of putting cattle out there. Because even though that's perhaps an act of God and it's not your negligence that caused the fence to go down, they're going to hire somebody like me to sue you, and I'm going to take your deposition. So you're going to be under oath and swear that you're going to be truthiness in everything that you say. And I'm going to say, you ever had your fence break before? You ever had it break right there? And I'm already going to know, right? Because I've already going to have pulled the police reports. And you're going to say yes, and I'm going to say, why'd you put cattle out where you knew that they could get out? And all I've got to do is convince a jury that I'm right and you're wrong. We'll talk about that in a minute, because if you're not scared right now, you will be in a second. Yes, sir? if you can petition your county road department to do it. I'm just happy that when I take a tractor trailer down the road, that I'm not whacking limbs and things like that with my road department. I'm happy when the kids come by and do burnouts where the part of the truck's on the road and part's in the ditch, when my ditches aren't 2 feet deep, and that kind of stuff. The road department is probably not going to come out and put your piece of guardrail up, but the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Petition your road department. You can try, especially if you can prove that that's a high rate or incidence area. Those are all great questions. So, yes, sir.
You were talking about, properties to your right is your fence that you maintain.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to put a fence up, there's no fence on your side. And you go to your neighbor and be like, hey, you're responsible for this happening to this fence. And you decide, I want to do woven wire, and you decide, no, I want to do polyrope because.
When I was born, it was 1980. It was, my parents lived in Franklin County, Kentucky. My dad attended an auction, and this farm was split into 2 tracts, one with a dilapidated house that ended up growing up in, and he bought it because it had the house. Did not buy tract 2 because he didn't have enough money. Farmed tract 2 forever until 1986, I think it was 86 or 87, Martha Lane Collins helped announce that Toyota was going to move in, where you can see the lights from that farmhouse, the glow in the air. The next door tract that we had farmed all those years was split off. My dad used the Kentucky fence law then, and 13 neighbors got an education in the fence law, and to this day, of those 13, some of it's plank, some of it's woven wire, and some of it is woven wire for part of it, plank on the other, depending on what they wanted to build at the time. Some of them used 4-inch posts, which I did not know they sold until then. So they had little toothpicks, and then we had 6-inch posts on our side. So they can build whatever they want, so long as it's lawful fence. So don't be surprised when people want a better looking fence or when they want the cheapest fence. Yes, sir.
I've had 3 instances like that, and the judge ruled that they had to build the same fence.
Now that is if you have to sue them to build the fence. But voluntarily, they can put up whatever they want.
Well, he cited 48 fence laws that they had to change. You and I are looking at each other. You're responsible for what's on your right.
Mm-hmm.
But the fence had to be the same. I could build the fence and build them.
Well, that's because you used this. But your neighbor, what he's saying is if no fence exists, the neighbor can just go in and build their half. They can go on and build the fence without you suing them. Or you can threaten to sue them, they can go on and build the fence. But it does not have to match. It only has to match when the judge said build the whole thing the same. Yep. Now, if the fence law was this and everybody got along and we lived in a rational, sane United States, that'd be the end of the fence law, right? You would just call your neighbor and say, hey, come out there and get your chainsaw and we'll go cut down the tree that fell down and that kind of stuff, right? The problem is a lot of your neighbors probably do not own a chainsaw. They probably don't own a claw hammer. They probably don't have any idea what a steepler is to drive the steeples that you're going to drive into these posts there. What about your old lady that's 90 years old? That little bitty, you're going to ask her to get out and help stretch some fence? Sometimes it physically can't happen. I've got an instance right now where I've got a military guy that bought a corner lot in Trigg County and cannot afford the fence. Just can't physically afford it. What happens when your neighbor is hard to find? What if it's a corporation that lives in Florida or an estate or something like that you're going to have to go run down and find them to sue them to get them to build the fence, or you have no idea who that is? What if you're the one renting a farm? Do you have the ability to sue your neighbor to build the fence? You do not. It is only for landowners, and it's landowner versus landowner legal combat. And despite how bad that fence is, why might that landowner not want to sue the fellow landowner? because they're cousins somehow. I mean, you all are from rural Kentucky. The cousin networks run deep, except in Meade County, Jacob, where those family trees don't branch a whole lot. That's an incest joke. Okay. Anybody else on that? Why they can't doesn't matter. You should, as a person, seek out and attempt to solve the situation. And it's going to be my deepest, sincerest legal guidance to you to not sue your neighbor. Because right now, when your cattle get out, Jacob, who calls you? The neighbor. Do you think they're ever going to call you again? You will probably get delightful one-finger waves if you force them to build fence. The cool thing about getting along with a neighbor is you find a good corner, and hey, we're building some fence. Where are we going to put in that corner? A gate. Where in Scott County, where I farm, we just call them neighbor gates. You put the gate in the corner. Why on earth would I ever need that? We have strong fence that's 4 feet tall that these cattle can't creep through. Well, you put the gate in the corner in case they do, and you need to get them back somehow. So those things are very, very common. Your neighbor might not allow you to put the gate there or access their property whatsoever to retrieve your cattle if you make them mad enough. But if you do think that you need to pursue the fence law, the rest of 042 or your instruction manual on how to do it. So it's the who, what, when, and why. So in number 1, it talks about where you're doing it, and that's district court. In district court and circuit court in Kentucky, usually those courts on the civil side are broken up by the amount of money in controversy, with the district court having a limited jurisdiction, and circuit court is where all your big $1 million lawsuits go. So regardless of the amount of money involved, district court is where you file these things. Does that make sense to everybody? Because that $6 a foot for the plank fence was off by about half, because I was just doing the math on what it cost me to do it not long ago. So that was for 1,000 feet. Now imagine if you have 3,000 feet of something that you need. District court's where you're going. Who are you suing? You have to sue your neighbor. You have to sue who owns the ground. That can be a sticky wicket. It's really nice when it is a single person or a husband and wife that own the ground. What is much harder is when your next door neighbor has 12 different owners. Have any of y'all gotten on the PVA website and just kind of snooped around about farms and seen who actually owns them versus who kind of acts like they do? Some of those are really interesting, that whole hordes of cousins own these things. LLCs, estates that may or may not be domiciled in Kentucky. You've got to go find who that is, and then you're not going to sue one of them. You have to sue all 12 of those people. Pretty big undertaking. But let's say you've done all of that. Number 3 is, so I'm going to give you all an if-then statement, right? If something happens, then this will happen. If you file a fence law claim, number 3, they are going to countersue and tell you your boundary isn't where it's supposed to be, because I have a survey that says this. And you're going to say, oh yeah? Well, I've got a survey that says this. And then you're all going to be in a survey fight in court about where the boundary line between your all's 2 properties are. What's interesting about that is boundary line disputes are handled in circuit court. So now you got 2 lawsuits going, right? But does everybody see what I'm saying? If you make your next door neighbor mad, they're going to counterclaim and say that that's not the actual real boundary. In Kentucky, we have a rich, rich history of our deeds not at all reflecting where the actual boundary lines are. Henry Clay, that we all studied in elementary school and high school, made his living correcting deeds. That's what he did when he wasn't in Congress. He was a lawyer that fixed deeds. In Scott County, I don't know if the surveyors were drunk or chasing snakes, but they can't make a straight line to save their life anywhere in our whole bloomin' county. Your deed should, if you're imagining a puzzle piece on a puzzle you'd put together, hypothetically your deed is a puzzle piece and it should fit in nicely like it does in the puzzle. The problem is going to be your neighbor also has a legal puzzle piece and your two pieces don't match on paper. This happens literally all the time. I'm going to guess better than 80% of the cases that I've been involved with, the deeds don't strictly match. More recent deeds are much better because surveyors are involved. Lenders require surveys in situations to make sure that their property that they're lending you money on, that you actually own it. That's pretty important as a lender. Also be aware that in Kentucky, that regardless of where you thought the boundary line was, through a process called adverse possession, if you've done it wrong enough or right enough, depending on how you think about it, for 15 years, the legal boundary has now moved to whatever you've made it or given up, depending on how you look at it, right? So if your neighbor has built fence 20 feet onto you and maintained their side of the fence for a period of 15 years, they can file something called an action to quiet title at any time they want, and they get that land for free, regardless of what your deed says or their deed says. Now you've got this third thing that's hanging out there, which is this unknown property line. So beware, you have to build the fence on the line. The Kentucky fence law is about boundary line fence. Yes, sir?
So if I build my fence on the property line, but I maintain both sides of the fence, and I take my neighbor's land for adverse possession?
If you have used it, there's got to be a use involved in the land. But why stop there? Why mow 3 feet? Go mow the whole paddock over there. Go steal 30 of their acres, not 3/10. If you're going to do it, go for the gusto on it. If there is an old fence on the property line and it doesn't reflect on your deed, you need to be highly suspicious that that might actually be the property line, regardless of what either one of your deeds says. You need to make sure. The best way to stop that clock ticking on the 15 years is going and having a talk with your neighbor. Hey, where do you think the boundary line is? I don't know. Where the fence is? That always has been the law. Just realize that people are humans and they build fence wherever they want to build fence. The Quarleses have been on a piece of property in Franklin County for 225 years, more than that this year. We have a rich heritage in not building fences in the right place. Or, I let that fence line grow up. I'm going to put the new fence like 10 feet over, right, because I'm going to mow it. Am I ever going to mow it? No. So now that's all grown up too. But by God, the next generation, they're going to get it. That's the Quarles generation we've been waiting for. And now you have a fence that has morphed its way down the hill by 80 feet, and now it's time to go get a track hoe and put it back up where it needs to be. Fences can and do drift. Be very careful. Yes, sir?
Back to the boundary lines, though, you go by the definition of a fence. You know, we had an act on one of our sides where there was some old barbed wire between some trees. Well, here's the fence line. It's not really a fence by definition, is it? It's not able to keep it.
A boundary line is what a deed would describe that would match your neighbor's deed. The fence has become the boundary line, rendering both of your deeds incorrect. So there's what should reflect on paper versus what is out there in reality.
It's not really, it was a fence 20 years ago. But now
You need to figure out where it was. The more interesting ones might be when you're building these fences, the front of your farm, where is it? Does anybody know where the front of their farm is? Closest to the road, right? It's always closest to the road. What's your deed say that you own? Huh? To the middle of the road. If it's a county road and they have an easement over it, really hard to put a fence post down the asphalt over in the exact middle of the road, but those roads move over time. They drift and change. Any of you all have a deed that references going to the middle of a creek or river?
The river took out some of mine, so do I can lay part of the river?
Did you gain ground or did you give up? You lost ground, but that means the person on the other side of the river might have gained a little bit of ground because the river has changed. They lost too, or sometimes you have net losers.
Claim part of the river or just the ground?
It's to the middle of whatever the river was at that time. So where the Elkhorn and the Kentucky River meet, that has changed in the last couple centuries. And so where boundary lines may be between us and the Strohmeyers has changed over time. So it's physical reality versus what it is on paper. I can trust the physical reality a lot more than I can trust the paper because I can go out there and touch it and take pictures of it and things like that. But if you ever have an old fence, before you start yanking it out, go talk to the neighbor, plant some flags out there, and just everybody look at it and agree, yeah, I think this is where the boundary line is. Does everybody understand that? So now you're proceeding. Yes, sir, Jeremy.
So on adverse possession, if you and your neighbor are both brand new property owners,
Okay, so this happens all the time, right? It's the classic couple 100-acre farm. They've tracked it off. Maybe the perimeter fence on the 200 acres is where it's supposed to be, but Clint buys tracts 1 and 2. Jeremy buys tracts 3 and 4, right? I mean, y'all can think of countless examples where this has happened in your county. It just happened to be that Jeremy's tract and Clint's tract cut through a cornfield, or previously existing cornfield. There was absolutely no fence. So that's your scenario?
not a new tract, but you just bought a farm, I just bought a farm.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that owned your farm before had been slowly drifting over with his disc and his planter for the last 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
And then, does the clock restart when I buy that property?
No, it's a theory called tacking. You're allowed to borrow the time before, so long as it was also done without permission. But you have to prove it, right? Because you have to prove all these things in court. And in my mind, and in court, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. And who's going to admit that, yeah, I stole my neighbor's ground for like 12 years, but you can keep stealing it if you want. They may not be keen to help you out in that kind of situation. But field boundaries can and do drift all the time. Anybody that owns a sprayer knows this. Because Roundup, you can see where it went. And then next year, well, I want to crop that, right? I'm going to plant right to the edge of the field. And sometimes these fields get a little bit bigger, and bigger, and only the fence stops it, unless you have a fence row nozzle. And you're spraying 2,4-D, and then sometimes a little bit of that falls out there on the fence so that you have to do less weed eating. It's illegal. Don't do that. Okay, so the next section down talks about what you can ask the judge for. And this gets bananas. You can ask the judge to rip out the fence. You can ask the judge what to do with the stumps and the rocks. Part of that lawsuit that my family was involved in, they fought over the stumps and the rocks. Who wanted them? Somebody will fight over anything. They can talk about who's getting that material, the disposition of it. The judge can assign 50% costs if the judge wants to. That is very different than my half and your half, right? I'm still on 042, and I am in section 4, sub A, B, C, and D. I'm describing the judicial relief, that's what it's called in legal terms, that the judge can give you. And most importantly, the judge can determine the type of fence built. Now, if you ever go to court and you win, are you ever going to build your own fence? No, because you will never, ever, ever be right. Ever. Because you've already made this person mad forever, right? And if they've lost in the court case, now they're going to fight about the fence or the cost or something like that. You hire that stuff done if you've won. But these are the things that the judge can assign to you. You can ask your neighbor for some money. You all can go build it. If that doesn't work, the rest of the section talks about going back to the judge, saying, Judge, really need to build this fence. Then you front their money. Then you go back to them with the bill. If they don't pay that, then the judge can actually slap a lien on their property, and you can get judicial relief and a nice little payment for that from year to year. It's called statutory interest. You can get 18% on your money if your neighbor refuses to build the fence, and you go through all of that. It's absolutely crazy. that is some of the fence law. You'll have any questions about the fence law before we start talking about some of the consequences and reality of?
Do you leave the old fence if it's going too wet and put new fence over top of it? Or?
So his question was, do you repair fence or do you yank it out? I don't know. Depends on the fence, I guess. Some fence simply isn't worth fixing. The stuff Jeremy's talking about, or what Chris talked about earlier with the lifespan of T-posts and things like that, at some point you start running out of things to hammer on or tie your fence wire to. Any of you all have T-posts that are so old that modern hardware doesn't fit on those old T-posts? They were made different. Some of those have like 75 or 80 year lifespans. Have any of you all gone out and tried to find old fence posts or T-posts to determine where the line is? The best way to do it is make sure all the wire's off and go drive a tractor out there and mow. You will undoubtedly find not the front tire. It's never the front tire. Somehow the front tire skips over them, or they're magic. You will find it with the rear tire, and it won't split it right in the middle. It'll get the sidewall where you have to actually replace the tire. That is the best finder of an old T-post that humanly exists. Now, when I'm doing it, I like to talk with the neighbor to say, hey, do you think this is where the fence is? Is this the right spot? But as we're yanking it out, I'll put a new post in, or a new T-post, so everybody can look at it while they're building the fence, and it won't be, two days later, 2 weeks later after the fence is built, somebody saying, oh, I think this is in the wrong spot. You make it all visible, all up front. If you get far enough down the case and you do sue somebody, if you've done that much and you've maybe have a combative relationship with the neighbor, I do like removing all vegetation at that point, because that will create less of a maintenance issue going forward. Even if they're good shade trees, yank them out, because when that thing falls, the neighbor's not going to want to help you at that point. So if you're going to do it all, if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound if you actually do the lawsuit. The balance of it, whether you stretch new fence, try to repair old fence, is kind of up to you. As long as you and your neighbor all agree on where the fence is, the world's your oyster. Yes, sir?
Is this best to have this all in writing, or is handshakes acceptable?
I wish we lived in a world where handshakes still meant something. I would highly suggest doing a text or an email. Or you can do the sneaky Clint lawyer trick of, if you did have a verbal communication with somebody, follow it up with a text. Say, hey, just so I remember this right, which is Clint's way of saying, I'm going to cover my own butt here, and I think you might be lying, so I'm going to put it in a text. It's not why I text you, though, Jacob. Your handshake's good with me, buddy. But those kind of things, I do like to follow up in writing, or an email, or if you're uncomfortable with those things, because sometimes, particularly being a farmer and doing leases or agreements and things like that, and then they know I'm an attorney, that just puts them on their heels a little bit. I will write out what happened and I will email it to myself. So then I have it, I have what we have, and I have a date and time stamp that cannot be altered later on. So I have just at least proof that I wrote this down on this day. And it wasn't 3 years later when it benefited me. You captured that thing. The best is just email or text communication is okay too. I like email a little bit better personally, just because it's a pain in the butt to try to print off text messages if it's a problem in the future. That's a good question. Everybody got that? Any other questions about the actual law? I'm going to stick around for lunch if anybody's got. I'm sorry?
Should you take any pictures?
Yeah, you should take pictures. Absolutely. I like documenting everything. Take as many pictures as humanly possible. If the cattle...
You're leaning on the new post,
Yeah, or if they're out there actively yanking up surveyor stakes or something like that. If the cattle ever escape, take pictures of where that happened, particularly if they weren't your cattle. So you can document that they escaped on your side, buddy. That's why you need the fence repaired or replaced. Has everybody got that? Because I've got one more thing, and Chris is standing up, and that's usually, he doesn't have a, wow, see, I'm on time. He's got a comedically big, hook thing like they used to have. Okay, let's talk about failure to keep your cattle in and what that mechanically looks like going forward. So you've got cattle. Anybody in here not have cattle or not have livestock? They're just coming to this because they saw the flyer and thought it was neat?
I don't have cattle. I had pigs last year.
Pigs will teach you to be a good fencer. Yes, absolutely. So in Kentucky, we have a couple different what are called legal standards, or they're legal standards of review. When it comes to negligence, one thing is what you should have done, but what you should have done, the theory is, was that foreseeable or not? So the rest of you guys are involved in farming, right? So think about the last month, and you all used your tractor. How many people in here hooked their tractor up with a hitch pin that didn't start life as a hitch pin? Like it didn't, when it was born in the forge or the foundry, God didn't say, you know what, buddy, you're a hitch pin. It started life as something else. What'd y'all use? I got a bolt. Is this bolt going to work? For you that are not doing this because you're all smarter than this. Is this bolt going to work to hook the tractor up? Hell no, right? It's going to fall right through the hole. That's why I got one of these, right? That's not going anywhere. How many people have used this or will admit to it? You all are a bunch of liars, is what you all are. You're all at a fencing school. Last night when I was digging around in the shop to find my other favorite hitch pin, not hitch pin, what about old gate posts? Or the gate handles, the hangers, the hinges, right? Those are great. They're not going to fall out. They got the little leg on them, right? I couldn't find any in my stash, probably because my farm hands have all used them as hitch pins. What happens to things that aren't a hitch pin or even regular hitch pins if you're in bouncy enough terrain or going down the road? They will bounce out. Have you all ever had one bounce out? My buddy Willis that farms on the Tennessee-Kentucky line was pulling a tank of anhydrous one day down the road in front of his kid's school. This is going to be recorded on YouTube. His name is Billis. Sorry. And he came to a stop, and his anhydrous tanks passed him because the hitch pin had popped out. So what should you do? If you could kill somebody, what should you get? A hitch pin that will always lock. That thing's never going to go anywhere, right? So these things are like $25 from Shoot. Your hitch pin and bolt is probably a couple bucks at Tractor Supply. If you all have regular hitch pins, how much are those R keys that go in the bottom that you don't use? You can get 2 for $1. Imagine the lawsuit when something happened and you've killed somebody because your hitch pin came out, and you're going to hire me as your defense attorney, right? I'll pass out cards later. And you're going to have me go to the judge and the jury and say, yes, my client killed you or killed your mom, your dad, your spouse, your kid. But, Your Honor, listen, it was going to rain. Do you think the judge is going to be like, oh my God, it was going to rain? Of course go do dangerous things, farmers, with the excuse of it's going to rain. Has anybody in here loaded hay and gone down the road and did not arrive at your destination with the same number of hay bales that you loaded? Nobody's going to admit to that either? If you flat stack them, it's 150 on a wagon, right? On a 20-footer wagon. How many people have arrived at their destination with 148? Because those 2 in the back corner will fall off if you don't put a rope on them. How many people have you ever noticed with a hay bale just out in the middle of an intersection? I one time stopped and got 2 free bales of tobacco in Scott County because somebody did not tie them down. I made a large effort to find out who they were. I looked around for about 10 seconds. Nobody was there. They got loaded because those were a public safety hazard right there. But how many times have you all cut a corner because it was going to rain or something like that, and you knowingly did something that was unsafe? And in this situation, it cost relatively nothing to prevent it, right? So this is going to be the lawsuit, except now I'm not your attorney. I'm going to be the one suing you. I'm on the other side of the case. So we're going to go to your county for whatever damages your cattle have caused when they've gotten out, right? So they got out, they always somehow can find the road. Half of you in here don't know what a tobacco bed is. That used to be what I would say. The cattle would get out and get in somebody's tobacco beds, but you have no idea what that is. I mean, it sounds nice. It's a good place to nap if you're tobacco. But let's say the cattle get out and cause significant injury. So I'm going to sue you, and I'm going to sue you in your county, and we're going to draw a jury pool. We're going to go through a process called voir dire. And so I get to ask the jury a bunch of questions. And one of the questions I'm going to ask them is, are you a farmer? Is anybody a farmer in your family? And if I can identify you as one of those, I'm going to try my best to have you not be on the jury. How do y'all like your chances of a lawsuit if there are no farm or rural people on the jury? Before I even start talking about all the negligent things you've done, do you like your chances at all? Probably not. I sold cattle last Thursday. I sold 855 steers. Guess how much they brought? I'd never understand how people do the per head thing. You don't sell them like that. You sell them by the pound. Why don't we do per hoof or something like a per tail? I don't understand why people convert it to head. You're cow calf, aren't you? That's right. That's how y'all think. I've never got it. But by the pound, how much? $3.49. And I bought back 29 that night. How much were they? They were $5.50s. $3.92. So do the math if you're not a farmer. Those things are worth how much per hoof or per head? 3,000. How much are those cows and calves on the side? $3,500 maybe for a pair now. And you've got how many of them? What do you start looking like for an attorney who's willing to take the case for somebody else that is recovering based on a percentage level? I'm not going to check and see if you've got a lien against the cattle or if you've got a lender. I'm going to see you as somebody with a bunch of liquid, high-dollar assets, right? And those liquid, high-dollar assets just hurt my client. So I'm going to want to relieve you of as many of those assets as possible. And if you own the farm they came off of, maybe we'll get that too. So think about how you look to non-farm people sometimes when it comes to the potential of a lawsuit. You all are going to be targets. So how do we not be a target? Or minimize being the target. Make your target as small as possible. Number one, you're going to act safe. Keep your cattle on your property. Number two, you're going to do what? Anybody? Buy insurance. Buy as much insurance as you humanly can. And when you're done with that, you're going to buy an umbrella policy to cover the rest of it. Farm accidents. That's fine, but I'm going to wipe out your LLC, and I'm not going to say never. I have exceedingly rarely, I've been an ag attorney. Today's my anniversary, so 20 years, because I got my bar results on noon the day I got married, which was very good because I passed, but very bad for the open bar at our wedding. There was a lot. So in 20 years, I've probably only seen a few LLCs that would actually survive. Do you have an LLC? You farm with the LLC?
I got 3 LLCs.
Got a truck?
Rental and trucks and then farm.
But I mean, you got a pickup truck?
Yeah.
Who owns it?
Me. I own LLC.
No. Who's on the deed to the truck, or on the title to the truck? Now, how does that work? You just let an LLC use your truck? I've got an LLC. Can I borrow your truck? It doesn't matter. You have got to keep an LLC 100% completely apart from your personal person for them to survive a challenge. Because that's called piercing the corporate veil. That's most of the time how I get somebody claiming they're an LLC. Because they never register the trucks or the vehicles in the LLC because it's a pain in the butt to do that. So that's there. Are you sure that through your LLCs, you got a debit card or credit card to go with them?
Yeah, they're got their own checking account.
Has the LLC ever gone to McDonald's? LLCs don't go to McDonald's. Well, you're required to have one annual meeting per year. Was that at McDonald's? It could be. I mean, they got 99-cent coffees if you have the app, but you got to keep all that stuff separate, and that's what I mean by piercing the corporate veil. Most of these guys that set up LLCs are well-intentioned. It's the follow-through with the LLCs that almost fail uniformly. It's very hard for farmers to keep the two stacks of money separate. Almost none of them do. But you're going to buy as much insurance as humanly possible. But then I'm going to also say that when you were working for the LLC, that was your negligence that let the cattle get out, not the LLCs. So I'm going to try every which way. You're still going to get sued, though, because I'm just going to name you and the LLC. I'm going to keep rolling. So we've talked about the likelihood of losing the suit. Now let's talk about behavior. And this is how I'm really going to get you in court. And that's what Jeremy was alluding to a minute ago. The first time the fence got cut, or the first time there was an accident in that intersection, maybe you could argue that. But under oath, I'm going to ask you, have your cattle ever gotten out? And you have cattle, and there's only one response to that, which is yes. I mean, have you ever gotten a load of cattle that just like to recreationally get out? They don't even go anywhere. They just like knowing they can, for whatever reason. But you're going to, under oath, say the cattle have gotten out, and they routinely get out. And I'm going to say, as a lawyer, and again, the standard in Kentucky is being foreseeable, right? This is foreseeable. This was the easy way to prevent something that was foreseeable. I'm going to say, why'd you put the cattle in that pasture? Why?
What if you put your fences higher than 4 foot?
I'm going to say you probably should put your fences higher than 4 foot.
The law says 4.
The law says keep your cattle on your property.
Well, that's the whole point of making it higher, I would think.
Yeah, but how high are you going to make the gate that you forget to lock? Or anything else? Any of y'all played that fun game? I play it all the time. It's a stupid game. I pull up to the gate. The cattle are in the far corner. I can see the cattle. They can see me. What I need is right over there. Zoom in, zoom out. I'm going to leave that gate open. I'm going to get out of the truck twice, right? What happens? Every time. You get up there, the cattle are still in that corner, and you get to tinkering on something or doing something. You look back, and the cattle are real close to that gate. Now you got the decision of, am I going to zoom down there and force them out and spook them, or am I going to ease down there and try to do something? But most of the time, it's other negligence when the cattle are getting out. Think about your own cattle that have gotten out. How many of it was a gate failure versus the actual fence being failed? Y'all are better at locking gates than I am. Or somebody forgets something, or a hardware failure. But the actual cattle getting out, my second question is going to be, as a matter of routine, I drive our fence for my paddocks every day. Do you all do that? When was the last time y'all counted your cattle? Last night. Okay, but the time before that, though? Night before? Okay, that's pretty good. I had 109 feeders that are all black. How many times did I count? And then once you count between 111 and 105, do you just assume it's 109 are there? You've got to have accurate counts. And I'm going to ask you these things. I'm going to ask you, did you record it somehow? Did you write any of that stuff down? What's your routine in doing that? And I'm going to look for holes in your argument there. But the biggest one being, cattle can and do get out, and why'd you put them in I understand your neighbor has the duty to build some fence, and maybe your neighbor's not doing as good as they can, and maybe their fence is only 4 foot tall, but you still chose to put the cattle in the paddock, and that's why you're personally responsible versus the LLC. And that's going to be my legal theory. I don't have to be right, I just have to win. And those are two different concepts in the law. Does anybody have any questions? I am going to stick around for lunch because you've had several good questions, and others have here as well. Does anybody have any other ones?
What if they go under the gate?
That happens all the time. That is a major source of frustration because this will be on YouTube, I'll use his name. Philip and I run cattle together, and we have a major disagreement about gate hinges. He likes them that go like this, so you can't move the gate, but every gate manufacturer says to put them like that so it evenly distributes the load. And he said, I've never had a gate pop off the post and a cow get out. And I'm like, Philip, my gates all work, and I've also never had the gate pop out because it'll put a little chain on there at the bottom. Yeah, you can put a crossbar in them or something like that. But how did the calf get out? How do you have fence or gates sufficient enough that a calf can pop underneath of them? I'm going to argue that that's not good enough fence. If there was a gap big enough for one to get its head in and start moving, then your fence probably fails due to clearances. Chris and I have given this talk now since, 2017. Yeah. We've seen a complete turn of cattle at least once since then. I used to talk about how doing the fences, we're in an industry where every penny counts, so your margins are very, very thin, but you have a huge amount of liability. It's much easier for me to bring the lawsuit against you, if you want to think defensively like that, when you're in an industry making wild profits compared to years past. So think about it. It's your treasure. I'm trying to help you keep or maintain as much of your treasure as possible. So think defensively, maintain your fence. If you have any doubt, do not put cattle in that paddock until the fence is fixed. And then when you're done with that, call your insurance agent and make sure your coverage is up to date. And if you have cattle covered under your policy, go back and read your policy for how much cattle are worth versus when you put the policy on them, because it could be a lot different, right? You could have much more risk now just because the value of cattle have gone up, but still be capped by your former policy. Read your insurance policies, and I'll leave you with this. This is something I discovered a few months ago. I haven't done a fence school since then. How many of y'all are farming with side-by-sides? Just a few of you? They're awesome, right? I have buckets of all the fence supplies that I need because of the condition of my fence there in the back. Your side-by-side, if you have Kentucky Farm Bureau and every other policy I've read, not just Kentucky Farm Bureau, I'm only saying that because they're the biggest one for ag in the state, does not cover your side-by-side. It specifically says you are not covered on your side-by-side. So think about that. And that's not going up and down the road. That is, if you are in it or someone is in it and causes an accident, it is specifically excluded. So read your policies. If you want the side-by-side included, just tell your agent and they'll add it for a few more dollars. It's a policy called a rider. All right, I'm going to stick around. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah. During lunch, we'll do story time. One time, and I will protect the names on this one, there was an incident in a county in Kentucky where a cow was out, the cow got struck, and the first responders and people left with the person, and the cow was still there, and when they came back, the cow's tags were gone. And that was the cow that belonged to no one at that point. Now, if you do branding or IEDs or something like that, then you're probably less so. I would, as with the value of cattle now, the department has not received cattle theft complaints like I would have anticipated we would have. They were very popular a number of years ago. The department will issue you free EID tags if you want them. So you got to think about how much those cattle are worth and sinking a button tag in their ear to make sure if they did go missing that they're your cattle and traceable to you might be something that's important. It's outside the scope here of the fence law, but probably something very important to think about when things get out. Now, that would be harmful when the thing gets out and strikes somebody, but otherwise, that's a pretty valuable free service that the Department of Ag can offer to you to do that.
And then, a couple of years ago, I was on the way to the airport in Nashville, and it's kind of raining, it was dark out, and on the side of my eye, I see this cow, and it's like running beside my car. Right beside the state car, and next thing I know, it kind of comes out a little bit, and I hit it in the rear end. And flip it around, and I called my friend Brandon, and who's the farm there. I said, Brandon, I think I hit one of your cows. He's like, I'm pretty sure that's not my cow.
Never admit it's your cow if that ever happens. But yeah, that's a good question. Is the plaintiff, that would be, so in your scenario, I was the attorney that's suing you. I have to prove that the thing was your cow. And most of the time in rural Kentucky, between your neighbors, you can figure out whose cow it was. And then if there was only 4 of you in the area, I might sue all 4 of you, just as plaintiff unknown in one of those scenarios. And then I think your neighbors might be really quick to remember it wasn't their cow. An IED tag, a button tag, has a unique identifier. Well, that's why I said that instead of a yellow flop. The ones that I showed you here earlier, this was a numbered sequential tag, so they were pre-printed. So that's one reason that I did that. But now we IED cattle, particularly if you've got cows and you're going to keep them for a while. If they've got the tag in, you can wand them later on. So it's just a different way to get and maintain data. That's a good question, though. Yes, sir.
Are you supposed to take all the tags out of the cow?
No, you are. I'm rewriting the cattle law, and very soon, if it's got a button tag in there, you are very specifically prohibited from taking the tag out of the animal. If it comes with a button tag from the yard, that is a federal criminal offense. So don't be doing that. Flop tags you can take out, but not the button tag. No, I swear I come to these things, and I will tell you this to answer that question, and I'll stop and stick around for lunch. In the 20 years I've been doing these talks, for 19 and a half of them, I always said, when nobody ever calls me to just say, hey, you know what, I'm having a great day. Nothing horrible's happened. I'm having the best day of my life. That's not the phone call that I get. So it does, farming's hard enough. You all understand farm humor. It's kind of dark, really, a lot of the things we laugh about. It's worse as an attorney. But I did that for 19 and a half years, and then one smart aleck did it about 3 months ago, called and said, I am having a great day. Nothing weird has happened, and hung up the phone. So I can't say that anymore. But near universally, yes, sir. It's a negative world, and the legal system is not it's never a fun place. And to think about it like that, you're either the defendant, and you're having to bore the cost of a defense. But sometimes even worse is you're the plaintiff and you genuinely have been hurt and you've got to go recover from somebody else and go through, relive the process and the harm again. And then even if you win, you got to give a third of it to some attorney. So it's pretty negative there as well. I'll stick around for lunch. Thank you guys for having me very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.